Here we go. Hello, system thinkers. I'm your host, Ben Callahan. Welcome to episode 073 of The Question. I'm very excited to welcome my friend Davy here. Davy, thanks for being here, buddy.
Thank you for having me.
Long-time listener of your show as well, so it's really fun to collaborate with another voice in the space, especially one as generous as yours. Thanks for all your time and energy, man. It means a lot to have you here. This week, you and I talked a little bit about, we had a long conversation about what should we cover, and we landed on this concept of AI for automation in design systems. And so we asked 4 questions of folks. The first 2 were very similar with just a subtle difference, and they were, when you think about your current design system workflow, what percentage of your time do you think could be automated away with AI today? And the other one was what should be automated. So the difference between what could be and what should be. And we gave folks a percentage scale to choose from. And then we asked 2 open questions. The first of those was, in what areas of our work do you believe we should avoid AI automation and why? And the last question, in our world, craft used to mean beautifully and elegantly designed and implemented interface work. In a 2026 design systems context, what does craft mean to you? And so we sent this out to over 1,000 design system practitioners. We got 101 responses this week, which is an amazing amount. And as always, wherever you're watching or listening to this, you can click the link to get the raw data and dive into those results yourselves. Gosh, Davy, where do you want to start, man? I feel like we covered a lot of ground in an hour, and you and I are just hopping back on right after the deep dive that happened this Thursday. So where do you want to begin?
Yeah, a lot of this, I think, goes towards that. If you could zoom into that chart that has the bar, let's see, the bar chart. Yeah, that one. Yeah, what tipped this off was Zero Heights Design System report, where they asked the question, do you have automation set up for your design system? And 37% said yes, but cumulatively, 63% were in the no bucket. So 32% said no, but we plan to. And then 31% said, like, absolutely not. Like, no. So what I wanted to gauge from our community, the question community, was how, for those that are not interested, like, why not? Is it a reluctance based on, like we mentioned, like the avoidance and changing the way we work? I know that we do get a lot of design leaders and even like above design leaders, like leadership overall in our companies saying, how can we use AI? Let's interject AI into all of this work. But there may not be a meaningful, just a practical sit down of what can be automated. This should be automated. What should be manually curated and done as a group. I know in the responses also there was some sensitivity towards moving away from rituals that are help us connect as designers, right?
That's right.
So those are the types of things that I wanted to hear. That specific piece wasn't mentioned in our session, which was interesting.
Yeah. It's funny, man. When I think about this stat from the Zero Height survey, I actually am the way that I would consider that through the lens of the data we just gathered is this group right here, which are the folks who decreased their answer from question 1 to question 2. So question 1 here was like, what could be automated with AI today? Question 2 is what should be. So folks who decrease, they answered, say, 50% could be, but only 25% should be. That's a decrease between the two. And those folks, it was like interesting to see sort of look at the rest of their answers, right? They believe that AI could automate more than it should. And they kind of got into this whole, like, if you look at their answers to Q3, they had this sort of belief that something important gets lost when we automate things away with AI. And so it gets at like that 63% that aren't doing it, from the chart you shared above. Like, why is that? Well, there's some interesting things. It's always framed in the context of loss. So what are we losing? We're losing organizational context, institutional memory. We're losing learning through doing. We're losing relationships that are forged in the work itself. We're losing the quality control at scale, right? So all these are the kinds of things they said in their later answers. How do you feel about that? I mean, do you agree with this?
Oh, I don't agree with the loss of organizational context because that's more of a reliance on like a single point of contact, right? So like obviously ICs, we all strive to be a point of contact for things. We strive to be known in our organizations for something,
Yeah.
right? So either like design tokens, documentation, automation, that sort of thing. But what if this is all documented? What if this was all brought into a skill? Does that take away my point of contactness does that take away my subject matter expertise title? I don't think so, but it does make it more scalable. Um, I think a lot of the especially like the language with the word loss is I think that it's a sensitivity towards like losing control and having the AI or the automation do the work for us. I don't believe the loss in learning is necessarily there unless you're just coding automations and coding processes and having no knowledge of how this should be done.
Yeah. I think that loss of learning one is really interesting. And a couple of the folks in the deep dive brought up this idea that like, if you think about the maturity of your processes, so you start with I don't know how to do a thing, and then you investigate and learn how to do it, and you probably do it manually to figure that out. And then at some point in the maturity of that process, you say, I'm tired of doing this manually and it's time to automate. Their point, I think, was like the more mature a process gets, the more ripe it is for automation. And I like that sort of model of thinking because in my mind, that means we've done the work to learn the lessons that we get from doing the work. Now we can automate it, right? I assume that we're going to get 80 to 90% of the learning if we take that approach versus just starting with the idea of automation. Like, I don't want to do that thing I know has been lurking in my to-do list, so I'm just going to ask AI to do it for me. Well, gosh, yeah, then you are going to miss out. You are going to miss on some things. So we did address that one. Yeah, the organizational context one, or being the point of contact or like the expert in an org, I do think people want that. And I also wonder, that's not super sustainable for the organization, right? To have like an individual who's the person who's going to have that knowledge trapped in their own mind. So maybe it's a better solution, right? To have it out of an individual and into a repository somewhere or something.
Yeah, it's a scalability issue, right? So like
Yeah.
what if like my manager will always say like what if you get sick or what if you go on vacation
Yep.
and who's going to be able to drive these like all like the wacky stuff Davy's been doing? And then I
Yeah.
would say, well, it could pause, like they don't need to run it, but it is in the org's best interest that I capture how to utilize all of this stuff. Obviously, like we did talk about in the deep dive, like sometimes we're creating tooling that is solely for ourselves,
Yeah.
which is fine. Like we're creating single use Figma plugins, NPM scripts to do specific tasks. It would be great to be able to document those lightly so other people could use them. But I think it's as long as we're getting use out of it and we're saving time and we find value of it, I think that's also okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I mean, I did this yesterday with one of my coaching clients. We were talking about a thing after the session. I was like, you know what? Like I could make that in about 5 minutes with Claude. And I did and sent it to them. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is great. And that's a single use thing. It's never going to be reused. It's just to solve a very specific problem, very specific context. And it's perfect for that. It's so I think there are definitely those use cases. This sort of like avoidance reasoning. So this again is comparing the folks who decreased their scores saying we should automate less, and the folks who increased saying we should automate more. And the reason that they gave for when they listed the things we shouldn't be automating on the decreased group was like philosophical. This was like, it was like a challenging my humanity, to offer
Mhm.
this up for automation. The other group, who was more maybe biased towards the use of AI, it was more technical. It was about like, hey, we don't think AI is ready for this kind of thing to yet, So very different reasoning there. Really interesting to sort of pull the data apart in that way. There was so much that we could, there's so much that we could talk about. I actually want to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, to give us sort of some clarity, because I think in the beginning of the deep dive, I picked up on some tension in the chat and in some of the conversation around people conflating automation with AI. So how would you define those two terms in the context of our conversation here so that we can see that they're distinctly different?
Yeah, I think automation on its own doesn't have to be tied to AI. Like the methods, like cron and like writing scripts to do jobs, repeatable jobs, like that's been around for a long time. I think
Yeah.
with the new tooling now, like we could, designers can use Claude and other agents to be able to do that. So I think the lens of this is looking at how can we utilize like our new tooling to create automations and be okay with letting go of some of the work that we used to do that is more craft oriented, or let's say like artisanal design, right?
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I think that's great. And I think the more we got into the conversation, I think people understood we were asking about the overlap of those things, right? Like using AI to automate. And so little nuance there, but it's always nice to just be really clear with those terms. I feel like that comes up in every episode. It's when you're getting 100 answers on a topic, people are going to kind of pick out specific things and like, challenge the framing and all that, which is wonderful. That's why we love the community. So, let's see. We talked about the maturity of the process. What else here?
I did want to touch on like the design, like the physical design tooling portion of it, because we talked a lot about like Claude and new tools. Like we didn't talk about any of the other like new suite of prototyping tools or such, but there was no talk about Figma and where most designers are still working. And like there's this narrative, obviously, like on X, where every few days, like Figma is dead, yada yada is dead, and like that. Especially if you're working in a enterprise form, like obviously that is not true. And if we pull the data, it is not true. But people are the time might fluctuate, and over the next 6 to 9 months, the iteration time, the time spent to modify components, maybe less, but there wasn't a lot of talk about I like to maintain components and design them and build them on my own, or I prefer to start with now with the new tools and like Codex and Claude. I would like to see if I could use Codex or Claude to generate them, and then I go in and refine them. So I did go through that exercise just as a pilot to there's, and I'm sure this is a case for many designers, is there's drift between code components and design components, or there's simply just no parity, like components are missing. So I wanted to see utilizing the new Figma MCP tools, and in the future also using the Figma console MCP tools. How can I code gen these components back into Figma? What is the quality like? How many passes do I need to do? And upfront, the quality's not great. Like if you're not hooking in your own design system MCP, the tooling is not quite there yet. But over a few passes and writing skills to refine and knowing what the guardrails are, it eventually got there. And I created, I would say, in these 24 components that I've created, 80 or 90% of the work was done through Codex. And then the 10% was through manually using our plugin, linting, applying the right tokens, applying the right instances, moving things. But it's still needed that we need to then go and have the human in the loop.
Yeah.
We still need to go back in and modify it, but I spent significantly less time building them up front.
Yeah. It's weird. I think I am, I've done some of the same experimentation, Davey, like sort of, I'm just curious, like what, trying it sort of repeatedly, the same kinds of tasks over the last 6 to 12 months with different iterations of the models and tools, just to see sort of how is it evolving. Cause I feel like it's hard, it's really hard in this space where things are constantly changing, to have like a control, like something to compare against, because it's always different, And
Mhm.
we were talking a little bit just in between the two sessions here about the explosion of tools and like the sort of the FOMO that comes with a new tool being released every week and a new model, a new version, a new whatever, And I think it's especially hard in larger organizations where a leader is having that same FOMO and maybe one month says, hey, I want everybody invested in X, Y, Z, suite of tools. And then they read some other thing. And now we want to move on to this because it's better. And we've invested so much time in building, workflows around that tooling. I'm looking forward to a future where there's a little bit more portability of the workflow between the tooling, and I don't know how far we are from that, but man, it would be nice because it definitely feels like I'm starting from scratch each time I go to do it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think what the design leaders want to see is just the appetite to try and introduce these new things into the workflow. So I think specifically for my project where I was working on utilizing the new Figma MCP tooling, they just wanted a proof of concept to know whether it's there, like, right. It
Yeah.
has and like you said, like, has the control improved?
Yeah.
And I would say the control has improved.
Yeah.
But if your stuff doesn't, if you have code components and there's no semblance of design components, you're not going to get to where you want. If there's some foundational components, you'll get there, but you need to. It's the Always Sunny in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
like the meme, right? You have to connect the dots, and you have to help them connect the dots. But they want to know that we're trying, and they want to know where it's at, and all they want to do is then report back to their manager,
That's right.
right? To say like, oh, we've tried it. This is where it's working. This is where it's not working. I'm not sure this is a good use of time.
Yeah, it's so true. I think the challenge, of course, on the other side of that is exhausting for teams, And we saw some of that in the deep dive. Keisha shared this in the chat. I'm fatigued from the constant changes, ups and downs, shiny new tools, all this, and lots of folks kind of jumped in agreeing with this. In my mind, this is one of the reasons we do something like the question or Redwoods, because no individual can stay current on all of these things all the time. And so having a group of folks who are, sort of like when they have the energy experimenting and reporting back to the community is a really good way to sort of be informed, at least on what's happening and where we should be spending that energy. So we asked folks, I actually kind of wanted to call out, Bill had this sort of on the idea of like, what does it cost to automate things? I liked Bill's perspective here. He kind of said, there are risks of using AI, right? And the one that he specifically called out, using AI for automation, the risk that he called out is that in his experience, when he's, this is kind of precursor to AI in his world as an engineer, when he was automating things, he oftentimes would find himself trying to automate a process that actually didn't make sense. And so the process of trying to automate it forced in his mind the conversation of, wait, we should rethink how we're doing this. And I think he's saying AI is powerful enough to probably go and automate some stuff that you probably shouldn't be automating. And so we missed that check, that sort of the checks and balances that maybe come with a more manual approach. Is this something you've experienced at all, or do you agree?
Yeah, there is a thread from this, and then another from another designer, Doug, where we were talking about where we should interject some of this automation. And I think like the one thing, if you think that there should be some more oversight and in the CI pipeline, like let's say you wanted to do like token linting or component linting or accessibility linting, put that into the pipeline, write that as like a reusable thing. And I had a discussion with one of the design techs on our team. Is it doesn't necessarily need to mean that you pass or fail the pull request. All we need is like a signal. So that is like another way for design system folks to gather data and understand how folks are utilizing the system. So I don't necessarily see that as a negative
Yeah.
thing. It's not a blocker by any means. You can make it a blocker, but I also think that with all of this stuff, like you see engineers now sort of in the weeds with just the sheer amount of code reviews that people need to do. So
That's
we
true.
do need the help
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. And I was just reading an article that was talking about this idea that like the more we sort of like bake AI and other automation techniques into the generation of code, the more responsibility we're pushing to the PR. And it's having to do things that it hasn't had to do in the past and that it's actually never really designed to do. And so like being a little bit smarter about like where we interject the human aspect of things earlier in the process means we can let the PR be the PR and not have to have like not vetting like did we even build the right thing, by the time we get to a pull request. So I think there's some smartness there for sure. We definitely got a lot of folks to jump into the FigJam with us and share all the ways that they're already using AI to do automation. So there's a ton of that in the FigJam. Wherever you're listening or watching this, there's a link in the description to get access to that FigJam file, and you can see that long list of things. Lots of stuff about prototyping. Randy was talking about what you mentioned earlier, Davy, which is like building like very sort of small purpose-driven tools for like maybe even just a single use. Automation for tokens, of course, GitHub workflows, creating dashboards, there are lots and lots of stuff, so it's really cool to see how people are already using it. Yeah, fun conversation today for sure. And there's tons more data in here. Is there anything else that stood out to you that you want to hit on here, Davey?
Yeah, I'm glad that it's beyond prototyping there, because I think the internally as design system practitioners at Atlassian anyways, like there is like a big push to move into like a higher fidelity, utilize the prototyping tools to create significantly better prototypes than just like the noodly prototypes Figma used to produce. But I think there's a bit of a struggle with what can we utilize them? Like, what can we utilize AI to help us with? So I'm glad there's like a plethora of things here, going from like the single use plugins, auditing, like obviously like idea generation, I think is like the one that a lot of more design generalists are doing. But then also I think it's really LLMs are really great for crawling information. So if you do have Confluence, or if you have Zero Height and you're able to let loose into stuff like that, or even Google Docs, right? It's great, like amazing for that. And even we didn't talk about this type of automation that I'm really keen on, but Slack automation. So automating design system report, automating and capturing specific key terms. So going into like your help channels and capturing things like Figma or breaking change or specific keywords that you think maybe dark mode. Dark mode is one that people like to gripe about, right? And then utilizing Slack MCP to bring those tidbits in. And I think the problem with Slack is like it's a double-edged sword, right? It's easy to communicate in Slack, but there's a fire hose of information. That's when you utilize the Slack MCP to pull these into post-its for you and act on them.
Yeah. So good. And you're right. It's definitely, I think prototyping was like the early thing. Well, we can do this with AI and it solves, saves us a little bit of time. But I think the smart folks are looking for really thin sort of slices of work to just have AI help me all along the process. I love that, rather than trying to have some like very wide, like AI do all of this for me throughout the entire process. I want it to help me in stages, and that's a nice way, I think, to sort of evolve. And as the tools mature, maybe we can allow it to do a couple of these things in a row, but it's nice to sort of break it down. And that's really what's represented in that FigJam, with all of these ideas for ways that people are actually doing it.
Yeah. I'm so happy that it's beyond just I want to use Cloud Design to generate a dashboard.
Right. Yeah. Lots more information in the FigJam. I captured some really fun quotes from folks, especially around what craft is, and I think it's like a moment in the space, for us to constantly evaluate this idea of craft. And some of these I thought were just really good, especially this one from Samantha. She shared that, and this was just directly from her answer to, I think, question 4. She said, AI is a manifestation of the average. Craft is rising above the average. I love that comparison, and it helps you. I think statements like that can help us clarify where do we bring AI into the process, So really fun. It's always great to hear from such smart folks in the community. Davy, appreciate you, man. You rock. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sort of bringing this question to the community. It's always fun to talk to you, and I appreciate your the generosity you have with your knowledge and experience.
Thank you so much, Ben. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you next time. Cheers. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Question. Remember, you can get access to the raw data, the collaborative FigJam, and all of the recordings for this episode and many more on my website, bencallahan.com. If you or your team could use an outside perspective on your design system program, I'd be honored to support you in that way. There's more information about my coaching and consulting offerings over on the site. Thanks for being here, and remember, stay in learning mode.